So, faith is the size of a grain of mustard. And that means it kind of lets us off the hook, doesn't it? I mean, we just have to take a little bit of action. You know, just a little bit. It's not like we have to do it all. But we have to do something. I don't have to do it all, but I got to do something. Together? I don't have to do it all, but I got to do something. And the something that we've got to do is both an internal and an external experience. Meaning, we've got to take a step and a stand within our souls. That's a step in consciousness, the prayer, the activity of moving our soul, opening up a space in our heart that can be filled with faith. And that's an action that we take. You know, faith is not so much a feeling as an action, an activity. And then there's the outer world. We've got to take some steps in the outer world. It's not just enough to want a Band-Aid solution, but there's steps we got to take. And we got to back it up. A Unity minister I knew down south said once to me, "Faith, you want to talk to me about faith? Well, faith got to have some meat on it. You know, how do you put some meat on a faith? You got to take some action. You got to make it real." Today we're going to be talking about loving what is real, but it's about getting out of the magical solutions and getting into something that really works. Now, what's a magical solution? Well, it's not new. Jesus in Jesus' day, the people of his, we talk about, the people of Jesus' day having so much faith. No, they believed in magical solutions. They had an idea that the power was outside of them, and that through no responsibility or taking any kind of spiritual action on their own, that it somehow would happen to them passively. That was part of their belief system. Archaeologists have found, going to Jacob's well and many of the ancient Israelite wells, that there were pottery shards deep within the wells, hundreds and thousands of them with incantations and spells on them. And that was what the people of Israel were doing, even in the time of Jesus, because they believed in a magical solution outside of them. Now, remember Wayne Dyer wrote a book called Real Magic, and real magic is faith, real faith. It's something that's not based on something in the outer. What is the difference between faith and magic? Well, magic is the belief that there's something outside of you that you passively, with no effort on your part, will just happen to you. But faith is something that is activated from within your own being. Did you know that Jesus probably didn't really heal anybody? I mean, he said so himself. Every time they try to offer him the kudos and the accolades, he said, no. Your faith has made you whole. And he was trying to redirect their belief system. That he was simply the solder that connected themselves with their internal source. That they, like you, they had an internal power, a presence, a connection with a source that was dynamic, that could meet every need. But it took an exercise of something, an action they had to take in consciousness. Remember, faith is not so much a feeling. It's far less a feeling than an action that you take, than an activity of spirit, and then in your outer world as you're guided to. And he said that don't get intimidated by this, because it's just a little thing you've got to do. A little thing. He called it a grain of mustard. Remember that? He said the way to move from, "O ye of little faith," to "greater things than I do, you shall do," is through exercising that grain of mustard, that small amount of activity. He said, "Truly I'm telling you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you'll say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Now, when that seed is placed in cultivated soil, it forms into a great tree, and the birds of the air can find a home in it. If you say to this mountain, "Be lifted up and thrown into the sea," it will be done. Have faith in God. I guarantee you that whoever tells the mountain to get up and throw itself into the sea, it will be. For this reason I tell you, when you pray and you're asking for something, believe that you've already received it, and it will be yours. So he was talking about taking an action in consciousness, a small action. You're willing to take a small action in consciousness. That's all it really requires. But you got to take that action and not just think it's something passively that happens to you just because. You know, there's a lot of people out there who have a religious belief system that it's just something that happens because of some external power rather than an internal dynamic power. I learned about this in my very first church. You know, I was the 27-year-old young minister in a church where the average age was 80. And those who remained there after a few weeks, the ones who liked that fact, would contact me and say, "Well, I want you to go visit my friend Sally. She's really down in the dumps, and I know that you'll cheer her up." They wanted me to go in and heal Sally.
I didn't know any better. So I'd go see Sally, and without exception, it would get weird. Sally would not be happy that I was there. She would feel a little resentful that her friend thought that she needed me to come there. Or she would be resistant, or it would be strange. Sometimes I got some real hostility. And I finally went into prayer. I went, why? What do I do? And I got, unless, this is going to sound challenging to some people and their codependency issues, okay? Get ready for this. Strap yourself in. But unless someone asks themselves for the help, do not offer it. Unless somebody asks for it, unless, of course, they're in an ICU or a coma or they're unable to do it. But if somebody has the capability of asking, then meet the need. But not secondhand, not a third party. And that's challenging to some people because some of us just want to go around fixing everybody, right? But that's a magical belief system. It's got to be from within ourselves. And Jesus always gave everybody that he worked with something to do. Every single healing that happened, there was an action they had to take. Sometimes there were opposite actions. Sometimes it was show yourself to the priest. The other time was don't tell the priest anything. Sometimes it was wash yourself in the river, or wash this poultice off from your eyes, or pick up your bed and walk. Every single case, there's something to do. And in your case, what do you got to do? Well, first in consciousness, you've got to take an action. You've got to take an action in faith. I remember back 35 years ago when I drove Norman Vincent Peale. It's closer to 40 years ago now. Norman Vincent Peale around in Kansas City, and he gave a seminar. And during his seminar, he talked about how he got into ministry. There's a lot of story to it, and maybe I'll share it another time. It's a very interesting story. But one of the things that was challenging was once he got into seminary and he decided he wanted to be a minister, he really didn't want to be a minister, and it showed up as he was terrified to speak, and whenever he tried to speak in his speech class, he would freeze up, and he'd stand up there and he couldn't say anything. And after this happened 3 or 4 times, his professor called him into his office and he said, look, you're flunking out of my class, and I know you think that you're just shy, but I know this, your father's a minister and you know where the power is that you can ask for some help. So you better go do something about it or you're going to get an F and you're going to flunk out of this place. Well, he went into the chapel right after that meeting in the seminary and he prayed. He says, look, I don't know what to do. And he remembered the prayer. You know, the man went to Jesus. He said, help me. I do believe, but help my unbelief. So he said, help me. I do believe. Help my unbelief. And he said, I wish I could say some magical thing happened, but all I did was I had the fortitude. I knew that I had backup. You know, when you take spiritual steps the size of a mustard seed, when you do a small thing, you got backup. You'll get backup. That's called grace, by the way. Backup for your intention. And so he would get up in front of his classmates and he'd try to talk to them. And he said, I was almost as afraid as I was before, but I was able to speak. And he said, to this day, I still have anxiety around speaking in front of people. But I just say, I do believe. Help my unbelief. Together? I do believe. Help my unbelief. And the power would come in and strengthen him. You know, I had a friend of mine, one of my ministerial school classmates, and his wife was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. And she was doing her prayers and doing her work and doing all these different things. And she was really in a desperate strait. And she finally went into prayer and just went into the deepest possible surrender. She realized that she needed to take a spiritual step in her life. That there was a part of her that was holding back. You see, whenever you take a step in faith, everything that's in the way between you and the step that you're taking will come up. Everything that, you know, if you're trying to take a step in faith, all the fears will come up. And so she felt this overwhelming feeling of fear and doubt. And then finally she said out loud, I do believe, help my unbelief. And she said there was a flash of light. This is what she told me. And the next time she went in, they gave her an x-ray and she was fine. There was nothing left. Everything, she was completely healed. Now, what happened there? She was willing to acknowledge that fear is part of faith. Now, this is a little tricky here. Because remember Jerry Jampolsky, his book, Love is Letting Go of Fear? How many people have read Love is Letting Go of Fear? Yeah.
And I was a minister about 30 years ago in a church where Jerry Jampolsky would come and do the Easter service every year. So the people in that church, they loved his book and they really felt love is letting go of fear. But I found that a lot of them didn't really understand what he was saying. He wasn't saying that you shouldn't have fear. In fact, the fact that you do love will bring up the fact that you do have fear. Love brings up whatever's in its way. And if you set an intention on the level of your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, all the other stuff will come up. It's almost like the rebellion of your subconscious mind will come up. And so I tried to share with these people that just because you're praying for faith, just because you love, doesn't mean that you don't have fears, that you don't have doubts. In fact, it includes doubts and fears. And we'll never grow to the place in our consciousness where we're going to outgrow the reality or the need to have human feelings. Jesus didn't. Over and over again, he expressed his feelings before he made a big prayer demonstration. Before he raised Lazarus from the tomb, he wept. He grieved. He felt his sadness. Before he was able to do the resurrection, he felt his fears. And it said that he had so much fear, it was like he was sweating blood. That's a metaphor, but it's a powerful one. You know, every time that he had something that he needed to clear, he cleared it. And how do you clear it? You feel it. You feel it. And so if love brings up whatever's in its way, if love is letting go of fear, you got to feel it. You say, but I don't really want to feel it. I mean, that's negative. That's a negative thing. You know, a lot of people believe that. A lot of people in Unity believe it. I remember James Dillett Freeman, who once wrote, I write on behalf of those who doubt, for I am one of them. And that's why his writing was so powerful, because he was in touch with his feelings. He once said that he wrote the book Story of Unity, which is Unity's history. How many people have read that book? I really highly recommend that you read it. If you want to learn about our teachings more than any other book, this will teach it to you, because we are not a dogmatic or a doctrinal belief system. We are an experiential one. And so if you read about the experience of our founders, you'll probably learn more than any other way. So anyway, he told me that he wrote this book initially 3 times longer than the one that they published. That they cut 2/3 of it out. One time at lunch he told me this. He says, now I'm an author. And authors don't like editors. You know, because we know that we wrote the book just fine, thank you very much. But he says, I really think truly it was a stronger book before they edited it. Because you know what they took out? They took out all the process. They took out the stories of the overcomings, the feelings of fear and doubt, and all of the negative stuff, the different things that they had to really overcome. In fact, it took years later when Sir John Templeton, the financier, financed 2 biographies, one Charles Fillmore and one of Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founders, and financed it and published it himself under his own publishing house, that all these stories finally came out about how they truly struggled and grappled, but successfully overcame all of these things with faith. And these books are out of print, because Unity still hasn't published them. But the truth, and that's not a criticism, I don't know if they could get the rights to them, but the truth is that he said the process included a lot of ups and downs, a lot of dynamic movements, and a lot of steps that they had to take. Remember, Jesus said you need to have faith the size of a grain of mustard, but if you plant that seed in cultivated soil, that means the soil of your own consciousness, your cultivated consciousness that you are working with every day with your spiritual principles. Then it will grow, and the birds of the air and the animals of the ground will find a place to live, and a lot of good will come out of it that you didn't even know was going to happen. So the question is, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? What step are you willing to take? Where are you going to take some simple steps and move in faith? When I was an associate minister in the Palo Alto church back 30 years ago, they made me write a column for the newsletter, just like Ruth makes me write a column for this newsletter. And so I would write it, but just underneath mine, there was a guy named Sidney Hennis, who I didn't meet. It was a big church, and he came in the morning service, and I had the evening service. And I asked somebody, who's this Sidney Hennis? You know, he wrote really well. I mean, he was really dynamic, heartfelt. Seemed like he really knew what he was talking about. It wasn't some second-hand experience. It was his first-hand experience of faith. And they shared with me that Sidney Hennis had been diagnosed 38 years earlier with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, the same disease that Stephen Hawking has. And that unlike Stephen Hawking, who the Lou Gehrig's disease, the ALS, had stopped and just didn't progress much all that period of time, Sidney Hennis is the only person in history that they have a record of that it actually reversed. When he went in to see the local Unity minister, at that time the church was in Menlo Park, California, and he went in to see the minister. I can't remember her name, but I knew her when I was a teenager in the Youth of Unity. And he sat down with her. She taught him about affirmations. She taught him about visualization and told him just take this every day. And no attachment to try to force an outcome, because there are times that people do move on with life. Sometimes death is the healing that takes place that moves on their soul. I know that's challenging to some people, but it's true. But in his case, he worked with this a little by little by little. And by the time I met him, when he met her, he was in a wheelchair. When I met him, which was 38 years later, he could walk, he could drive a car, he could talk intelligibly. There was just a little bit of slurring of his words or a little bit of walking like this. But he demonstrated this. He demonstrated this because he took something and he put it to work. He demonstrated this by taking what was his to do and putting it to work in faith. Now, I'm asking you, where in your life can you take a step? Sometimes it's a simple thing. I remember many years ago I was in a situation where I was having a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, and I was in a church where someone came to me and said, I just get the feeling that what you need to do is whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, take a walk around the block. So I dutifully took a walk around the block, but the block was a mile in that church. But every time, by the time I got back, not only was I out of my sense of agitation, but I felt like everything had shifted, and it did. Now, I'm not saying that walking around the block is, but it's doing something in your inner consciousness and doing something in your outer consciousness that would make the difference. Again, remember, every time Jesus did a healing, there was something that the person had to do. And sometimes they did it before. And I love this story. This is one that I just brought this morning, and I wasn't sure how I was going to fit it in, but here you go. As Jesus went along, people were crowding onto him from every side, and among them was a woman who had suffered from severe bleeding for 12 years. She spent all the money she had on doctors. Now I'm going to stop here. In the Talmud, in the Jewish writings, there were about 27 healing steps that people could take for this, including putting on poultices of the ashes of burnt ostrich eggs. I mean, all kinds of really wild stuff. So she spent all her money on these things, but no one had been able to cure her. She came up in the crowd behind Jesus and she touched the edge of his cloak, and her bleeding stopped at once. And Jesus asked her, "Who touched me?" Everyone denied it, and Peter said, "Master, there's people all around you. They're all crowding in on you. They're all touching you." But Jesus said, "No, someone touched me. I knew it. I knew the power went out of me." And the woman could see that he'd found her out. So she came trembling and she threw herself down at his feet. And there in front of everyone, she told him why she had touched him and how she'd been healed at once. And he said, "My daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace." So the action that she took, and then he was letting her know. See, she thought it was his gown, his robe. But it wasn't. It was the activity of faith that was within her soul. And Jesus again said it was like the grain of mustard. And if you say to the mountain, "Move," it will move. My daughter just was accepted to Hunter College in New York City. And she's going to be moving there in a few months. And about 20 years ago, the former head of the religion department of Hunter College was a teacher in my church and was a friend of mine. His name was George Elder. And he was a PhD psychologist. And he shared with me that he had been raised in the Appalachian Mountains in a snake handling church. His family was very, very uneducated. No one had even graduated beyond grade school.
And so he learned in his Sunday school at the age of 7 or 8 the quote about, if you say to the mountain to move, it will move. So he sat in his window and passed over yonder gulch. There was a mountain, and he just said to the mountain, move. And it didn't move. So he kept working with it. Move. It didn't move. He kept telling it to move, and it didn't move. Now, he was a very precocious child, smart enough to know that he'd been told something that wasn't true. So he became an atheist right there at the age of 8 on the spot, because the mountain wouldn't move. Years later, he, of course, was the only one in his family to graduate from high school, and then went on to college and scholarships, and he joined the Peace Corps. He was stationed in Thailand, and he was in a little village where they were practicing Buddhists, and he fell in love with Buddhism. He began to meditate. He began to have internal experiences, spiritual experiences, because of his spiritual practices, and he became a Buddhist. And then he began to reflect on his own faith and how he'd been raised, and maybe to understand things differently. He healed that part of him that resented some of the things he felt that were not true, and he realized that when you tell the mountain to move, it does move. But there's more than one kind of mountain, and there's more than one way that a mountain can move. Meaning that the mountain that moves is your mountain of consciousness. You know, we sow in the fields of consciousness every time we pray. We don't necessarily get the literal fulfillment of it, but every prayer is heard and answered in that we're building consciousness. We're building consciousness, and perhaps we're going to reap in another field. We're sowing in this field. So he said he realized that he would tell the mountain to move, but the mountain that was needing to move was not necessarily the physical thing he was trying to get done, but was some change within his own consciousness. And there's more than one way that the mountain could move, because there's more than one way that the answer shows up. And we have to be flexible and open in our consciousness. Flexible and open in our consciousness, knowing that doubt and fear are a part of faith. And this is, again, challenging. But every feeling that you have is valid and necessary. As Chris Selvig's acronym, faith. Faith always is the feeling. Feeling Feeling all is the healing. Feeling all is the healing. Sorry, Chris. Hope he doesn't listen to this. And so I want to share with you a way to get in touch with your feelings. And we rush around all the time. We don't necessarily know what we're feeling much of the time. And so, how do you get in touch with it? Well, probably the thing that I learned that helped me more than anything else, because I'm always very much a cognitive person, very much about thinking. And feelings, kind of, I push them aside most of the time. And then I worked with a wonderful woman who had been in my congregation in the past. Her name was Dr. Mary Allen. But after I moved to Florida, she lived in California, I worked with her every week, and she shared with me a process called the agitated energy process. We've got the sheets right outside of Fellowship Hall. But it's a very simple 3-step process. If you're feeling some agitation, if you're feeling uncomfortable, or there's a body sensation that you're not comfortable with, ask yourself, what is this agitated feeling? And then let it surface. And it's always sadness or anger or fear in some form. You could use other words for it. For instance, sadness could be grief, or anger could be rage, or fear could be anxiety. But it's always some combination of these feelings. And then ask yourself, what is the false belief that I'm holding that's causing this feeling? And then go into a space of I don't know. And let that false belief come up, because it's within your being. You know, feelings are the result of beliefs and attitudes that we hold. And so you can find out what that attitude is. And then ask yourself, what true belief would calm me? And go into a space of I don't know, and let that come up. And then write that down. Because within you, there's not only the feelings that you need to let go of, but also the solution to the problem. You already have within you that knowledge. You're connected with everything in the universe. And if you work with this, if you work with your feelings, you'll find that you'll be able to get real with faith, to get real and let it go. So I'm going to invite you to
to join with me in a little time of meditation, in which we're just going to get in touch with that core of our being and open up a space for faith. And so just take a deep breath and let it out. And imagine once more that there is an opening in your heart, in your core of your being. However you want to open it up, just imagine an opening that is filling with faith. An opening. I open myself to greater faith. I recognize that faith is like a muscle. I must exercise it. That faith is a dynamic power. And I open up the space in my heart for faith. And if I have any fears or doubts, along with my breath, every time I breathe out, I just breathe out the fear. I breathe out the doubt. And as I move more deeply into this presence, I feel the spacious opening of the heart of my being, the core of my being, my Christ consciousness. This dynamic power of faith. And I know that my exercise, the size of a grain of mustard, gets all the backup of the universe. I open my heart in faith. And I just let it be. I just let it be. I'm so grateful that as I move into my world, that I get all the backup from the universe that I need. I'm dynamically supported and uplifted and move forward in faith. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. Oh, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and allow that breath to come into your beingness and let it out. And as you breathe in faith. And as you breathe in, breathe out any fear that you may be holding. As you breathe in faith. And as you breathe out any doubts you feel. And set aside everything in your hands and open your hands and let that be the open space that symbolizes the open space in your heart. And once again, breathe in and breathe out. And as you watch your breath, every inhalation is faith, greater faith. And every time you breathe out, you're letting go of any fear, any concern. Moving deeper and deeper into the everlasting presence. Underneath us are the everlasting arms of God. We are supported in a powerful way, uplifted in a dynamic way. Faith is not a passive something. It is an action we take more than a feeling. We take this action by exercising our wills on the level of our own hearts and consciousness. And we begin by opening up a space in our hearts that is filled with faith. I open up a space in my heart. However you need to do this, imagine that you're opening up this space within the core of your being. And imagine it flooded with the faith-filled light, the faith-filled hope, the faith-filled peace. Open your heart, open your mind, open your beingness. And now let go of everything that's unlike the faith. If thoughts come up, just remind yourself that I am a faith-filled center of radiant light. I clothe myself in spiritual light and generous energy. I let it move with me easily. Ready to express in everything I do and wherever I go. I take on and take in the spiritual energy of faith as I open my heart wider. I am a dynamic expression of faith-filled energy and power. And whatever need I may have, I bring it into the center of my heart, this open heart, filled with faith. And I place it there in this hearth, this open space of faith. And I let it be. My Christ consciousness dynamically opens a space in my heart that is filled with faith. My spiritual consciousness is opening up to faith. I exercise faith. I know that faith is not something passive, but it's something I exercise like a muscle. And I let it grow and I let it build. A dynamic energy that moves with me wherever I go and whatever I do, ready to express. I open up a space in my heart for faith-filled energy, and I am free. Thank you, God. Thank you, and so it is. Amen. So, we're preparing for our time of giving, and we're going to do so in faith, exercising faith. So as I give, I exercise my faith and I receive abundantly. Together. As I give, I exercise my faith and I receive abundantly. And silently. And again aloud together. As I give, I exercise my faith and I receive abundantly. And so it is. Amen.